What's up, guys? This is TJP, the Philam Flash, and this is the I Only Touch Greatness podcast.
Looking for the most beers on tap, great steaks, great staff? Head over to the John B. Pub.
We got the best beers, steaks, chicken wings, nachos in town. Come see us at the John B. Pub.
The John B. Pub, the best bar in town. Come sign up for our football pool. Say hey sent you.
The #1 sports podcast in Vancouver with Ryan Hayes and Big Mike.
So born in KC and grew up in Cali. What was childhood like, and when did you really get into the wrestling scene?
Childhood was quiet. Normal suburban kid, I guess. Went to private school, played sports growing up. And yeah, I mean, a lot of my dad's family were all born in Kansas City. I was raised in California, and my childhood was rather abrupt because I started wrestling when I was 13. So kind of right into the lion's den at an early age.
Do you play any other sports growing up?
I mean, every sport. I played football, baseball, basketball, soccer. When I got a little older, I started playing hockey. Yeah, you name it, I did it. And then kind of started getting out of all of them when I was midway through high school, because I'd already been wrestling for a couple of years, and it just became apparent that was what I was going to keep doing with my life. So I started weeding those out a little bit, much to, I guess, the dismay of my dad. He kind of wanted me to be an athlete. He still got it in some form, but
yeah. Were you good at hockey?
I was okay. I mean, I didn't start until I was a teenager, and everybody had kind of told me I picked it up real fast because I was naturally a pretty good skater. So, I mean, that's 70% of the battle, is just being able to maneuver. So I was a pretty good skater, and generally I'm a pretty good playmaker. I have good vision for team sports. So I tend to like team sports like that, and soccer, basketball, where you're going two ways, and I generally liked being able to stay in the middle and help get other guys going. So playing center and playing defense was usually pretty good for me because I could see wherever. I had a pretty good intuition of where everybody is and where the bounces will go and stuff like that.
Every team needs a guy like that, the setup guy.
Oh. Yeah, I prided myself on that. I wasn't a great shooter. I was okay. But I was usually pretty good at finding the open guy or moving the puck around, stuff like that. I was always pretty good. And I had pretty good hands too. A lot of those, I wasn't as good as a lot of the younger, junior hockey kids today, but a lot of the little scooping tricks and things that they can do, I was able to do pretty easily. I could just watch somebody do it once and I'll be able to do it. So I had pretty good hands, as far as that goes. But yeah, I enjoyed the playmaking part of it. So
of course, being from Canada, we love hockey. So, and like we say in the lacrosse school, we always ask the question to our hockey guests, can you do the lacrosse goal? And I know how to do it as well and pick the puck up.
The Michigan, and the Yager, and all those.
The Michigan goal. Yeah, that's pretty good. It's good to see that you had hockey in you.
Yeah,
Mike.
Who did you kind of look up to in wrestling, or who did you trying to mirror your wrestling after?
I mean, I don't know that there's really any one guy. I've always the guys I really loved and kind of looked up to, I have tattooed on my arm here. So I got Eddie, and I got Sean, I got Tiger Mask. But I mean, there's so many guys. When I first started, when you kind of don't know yourself, a lot of good advice usually for young guys is to sort of emulate somebody that you not necessarily see yourself as, but just somebody that feels like it comes naturally to you. And so a lot of the guys I would imitate or sort of emulate a little bit in the beginning was like Regal and Finley.
Yeah.
And some of those guys. I don't really think I'm built like those guys, but it was a natural way for me to get started. And Tiger Mask too, and like the way they have very like counterintuitive, I guess, ways of movement, but different situations, you know, those are the guys I kind of followed physically. And then as I get older, you know, any performer, as they get older, they start to become more themselves. You know, Kobe Bryant eventually became less Jordan and more Kobe, so to speak. So it's like that's the sort of thing when you start to get a little older, you find yourself and then you become what you want to be.
And early in your career, you went over to New Japan. What was your time like over there?
I mean, it was still an old schoolish time in the company in wrestling. So a lot of the guys that were there were still the late 90s generation, the mid 90s generation. So Scott Norton was the main guy for the Americans or the foreigners. It was still like Liger. Yeah. It was still the Liger generation, you know, so like the Eddie Benoit, Dean Malenko, like that generation, that generation was still there, except for, you know, those guys, obviously they had gone on to WWE, but like, you know, Liger, El Samurai, Kanemoto, guys like that were the guys there. So those are the dudes that I broke in with. And, you know, it was a hard generation to come up. It was still like a time when it was kind of brutal in the dojo, and I was treated as a student when I came in. So I did the same thing as like, say, Benoit, or like how Finn Balor did later on. He actually came into the dojo right after me. So I would be, you know, living in the dorms and doing squats and helping cook the food and stuff like that. And, so it was kind of a culture shock. You get bored a lot. At that time, there wasn't really like Wi-Fi and stuff everywhere. And some places that have now been developed at the time were just like bus stops with nothing at them. So like, you know, you get bored a lot when I was there. But it was the place I always wanted to be. So I got really lucky that it was the first really big place that came up just a few years into my career.
Do you have any pre-match routines or rituals?
I like to listen to Michael Jackson. Okay. I don't really have any kind of routine or ritual. I just, you know, when I'm up, I go out there and just let it fly.
Yeah, well, Michael Jackson song?
My favorite song is Billie Jean.
Okay,
I like it. I like it.
Yeah, that's my favorite song ever. He was like such an icon for me growing up. You know, like he was like my Elvis. You know, I feel like a lot of us, our parents, you know, grew up on Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis and those guys, and Chuck Berry. And I did too a little bit, but you know, Michael Jackson was like my Elvis. You know, I grew up and he was the guy. He was the biggest star in the world, and he just had such a presence about him. So I always looked up to that, and I still do.
Yeah, I was always a big MJ fan as well, and Tupac.
Tupac as well. I mean, being an LA kid, I grew up on Tupac.
Yeah, that's back to that question I asked you. I might as well ask it now then. The same question I asked you a couple weeks back. If we're having a dinner party and you can bring 3 famous people, who would you bring? And one of my answers is Tupac. That's how we got for this.
Yeah. Tupac would be a good one. I'd probably say, I think I said Chaplin when I did it. Chaplin's one. I'd probably say Chaplin. I'd probably say Michael Jackson. And gosh, Johnny Depp.
I like it.
Pretty fascinating.
I like it.
Yeah.
I always go with Muhammad Ali, just so I could pick his brain, and then I usually throw in like a Wayne Gretzky and maybe a little Carrie Underwood.
Yeah, those would be good ones too.
Yeah, until his wife finds out he's been inviting Carrie Underwood to dinner. Yeah, and I always go with like got to be Seth Rogen, Tupac, and then Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, those would be. I was blessed to be around Hogan for a while and a little while, and I got to pick his brain a little bit. And
in those TNA days.
Yeah, he's a fascinating person and so incredibly down to earth and humble. Like he's so weird because for a guy that's so globally recognized, it's like he doesn't realize that he's himself. You know, like he'd stop and talk to anybody. He'd make time for anybody. He's got such an incredible heart for people, and he's really like the last guy to be like, "Well, I'm too good for this," like sort of thing. Like he's so. Like just such a normal guy, you know.
That's awesome.
Good. Yeah, that's good to know because on my bucket list of things to do, I always wanted to go down to Clearwater and check out Hogan's Beach Shop.
Hogan's Beach, yeah.
It looks like a fun place to go, and like I don't know how often he hangs out there, but looks fun.
Yeah.
And then of course the Cruiserweight Classic tournament. That was. Did WWE come find you for that tournament, or did you have to like apply for that? Because that was that was like your main like the first time I really recognized who you were.
Yeah, no, they came and found me. I like gave up on applying this.
Yeah.
If somebody doesn't want me, then I don't really care about them. So it doesn't really matter.
Because you were with WWE early in your career, for a little while, short time, right?
I mean, I wasn't really with them. I was working with them, but I didn't belong to the company.
Oh,
and so I'd be invited to do matches and stuff at Raw or SmackDown, and then I walked on at FCW and to try and be there, you know. So that was really like the last time that I really like put myself out there and like as you said, like kind of applied for what I wanted. And you know they didn't want me, and I ended up homeless at that time. That's when that happened. So pretty much that moment told me like from this point on you're going to be yourself and you're going to make it on your own, and if somebody wants you they can come get you. If they don't want you, then you're going to do better than them and you'll do fine without them. And so that's been my thing ever since. Like I don't care what logo you have on the front of your jersey. I'll play for your team if you want me. If you don't want me, I'm fine with the name on the back of it. And that's simple.
That's a good way. It's a good way to look at it. I like that.
That is a good analogy. Yeah,
it is. And also, what was it like being known as the first cruiserweight champ?
I mean, it's pretty cool. It's weird. Like maybe stuff like that really affirms my faith. I don't think anybody should believe in any one thing or whatever. I was, raised Catholic. I've always been pretty religious, I guess you can say. So I don't believe in coincidences in the general sense. Like I believe in coincidences, like in certain instances, but most of the time I feel like everything happens for a reason. And so I felt like that was maybe something that I was meant to do. And maybe I don't know why yet. Maybe it's still, maybe I'm still yet to find out why I was the person to do that. But when it happened, it felt so oddly specifically crafted for like my life that I didn't, just felt like so reaffirming, like, hey, you must have programmed this for me.
Yeah.
And, like a lot of people in my generation, I got in because of the cruiserweights in WCW, and I'm old enough to have, if I was good enough at that age, or maybe a little older, I could have been a WCW cruiserweight because I got in at like 1998, 99.
Yeah.
So
that was the best time too. The cruiserweights in the WCW era was always my favorite. I mean, Chris Jericho, fuck, tons of them. There's more than just Jericho, but Rey Mysterio always growing up, because I was always a big fan of the NWO WCW era. So that was when I watched the most wrestling of my life, was that era. So of course you gotta love those days.
Yeah, and like I said, New Japan is where I always wanted to go, and that's because of the juniors and the guys that you mentioned were part of that, junior cruiserweight era in the '90s, and so coming up with that as like my model, and then later on when they bring it back after like a decade of not having cruiserweights, and then I'm designated as the guy to sort of lead that charge for a couple of years or whatever, then it was, there's a lot of ways to describe it, but it felt significant in that way, just for many reasons. So yeah, I'm grateful I got a chance to do it.
So my buddy Prince Allen is here all the way from Kansas City. So
hey, hey, always loved watching you on as Manic on Impact. Yo, always. I was just watching the one of my favorite ones with you and let me see, who was it? It was one of my favorite ones. It was the X where whenever you was performing as Suicide. When you was getting out of the Suicide mission. Manic. Yeah, I was watching that. And tell me a little bit about that, you know what I'm saying? And that X Division role at that time, you know what I'm saying? Like at the early years of Manic.
Well, I guess at that time, so I first came into TNA in 2003 when I was Puma. The X Division was brand new at the time. Yeah. So when I first had started, that was like, you had like Sabin and Shelley, but they weren't the Machine Guns yet. You had PD and Sanjay, Jay Lethal, those guys. So that was like what we were. And then later when I was Suicide and Manic, the company had reached a different position, I think, in the world. At that time, like the, TNA Impact was like what AEW is now. Big TV deal. They're traveling to probably the same type of arenas, like these like 10,000 seat arenas. And they would do okay. Some would do not so good, but that was like where they were, like right, pretty much what AEW is now. Like this is their like make or break. That was like their make or break year or two. And the X Division, had become such a cultural icon for wrestling at that point, I think, because now I was starting to meet people at like meet and greets or something like that. And kids would tell me like, man, I got into wrestling because of the X Division. So they would start watching wrestling when they're like, 11, 12 years old or whatever. And that was in 2002 or 3. They grew up on the X Division. Now in like 2013, 14, when I was Manic, they're like, now they're like 25 years old and they're like adults. And they're like, man, I grew up on this and stuff. So it was kind of crazy because like speaking about like the cruiserweights before, like that's how I would have looked at, say, like Eddie Guerrero, like, man, I grew up on you. And then if I were to have met him in WWE or something like that, it would have been like, wow, you were like this. You were this for me like 10 years ago. So that was a cool time. Oh no, I was just saying that was a cool time. I think for Impact, that was probably the biggest they ever was during those years.
Right.
That's what I was going to say right there.
With those matches, and you had like even with Sanjay, because that's what I was talking about with Sanjay Dutt. You know what I'm saying? Whenever he was trying to, because he was at that time he didn't never had the X Division, and you kind of took it. You know what I'm saying? At that time, you know what I mean? But which was a pretty awesome match, though, No,
well, thank you very much. I enjoyed that, especially that stretch of matches around that time and winning the X Division title at that time. I had great opponents.
And I always look back at the X Division as just remember seeing the ropes above, and I'm like, holy, this is so like brand new and great. And they had the octagon ring and everything was taken off. And I'm like, okay, great, somebody to compete with WWE. And we were watching it, and it was like Jeff Jarrett era, like the good days.
Yeah.
And the main event Mafia, and like those days of the Impact, or it was TNA back then. But okay, let's ask that question. It wasn't one of my questions, but what happened there? Why did the name change from TNA to Impact?
I think they wanted to rebrand to something that seemed more generally applicable, you know. In the beginning, I feel like, you know, obviously TNA was meant as wordplay, and they started off as a weekly pay-per-view and programmed like that, and getting those weekly pay-per-view buys at that time, like the pay-per-view business was like shock television, you know. So, you know, you had wild stuff like, you know, stuff that's kind of like X Gamesy, or like, you know, just like kind of like alternative events, you know, or you had stuff like Girls Gone Wild and things like that. And that's what weekly pay-per-view market was. So I think that was their way of taking this alternative sport entertainment, like an X Games or a strongman competition or something like that, that's like, you know, aiming to be eventually what WWE is, but it's pro wrestling. And then, you know, kind of having this crossover ambiguous like branding, like stuff like a Girls Gone Wild or something like that, that was just part of the pay-per-view model at the time. And I think I guess maybe it did its job as far as getting people to like check out what it is. And I just think after a while, they didn't really know whether or not like they, you know, they got into where they had the type of investing in TV deals that they wanted. And then it was like, well, now you should probably, you know, be a big boy company. But then I think part of the office structure at the time was like, well, we would like to stick with the branding that we've created. And I think some people in that conversation at that, you know, at that pay grade, I guess you could say, is a lot of them probably felt like maybe the branding had already differentiated itself enough and defined itself as pro wrestling enough to keep it. And then some other parts of the office and infrastructure and the, you know, production side of it, like as far as like, you know, the distribution company and the networks and stuff like that, a lot of those people were still more formal in their thinking, like, no, we need to think of something that's more generally like branded so that we get away from that. And so I think that war kind of went on passively behind the scenes for a few years. And then eventually it was like, okay, we really should do this. And I think it was really the network. I think Spike TV, from what I understand, was the ones that said, look, we'll go in, we'll pay for the rebranding and invest in it and have it, you know, the imagery, all the stuff that needs to be done. But you guys, we all need to be on board with this. And so that's kind of where that came along.
Oh, okay. Mike?
Yeah, how important is it getting fans back in the stadium, and how much has it impacted Impact? Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to say. Generationally, I think that it's an interesting question. For me, I was brought up in such an older generation. Guys aren't made like me anymore, I don't think. So I was taught to perform based on your audience. So for me, I thought it would be a culture shock to not have it, but you know, I think that I've just had so much experience at this job that it didn't really change a lot for me. It changed the way I approached how I do it, but it didn't really hinder me at all. But for a lot of the younger performers, you know, especially the performers who are, I don't know, 26, 27 and younger, they've come up in a generation where they sometimes don't even understand how to use the crowd. So to not have the crowd probably didn't really bother them at all, other than not having maybe adrenaline or something, which for me, like, I don't get adrenaline anyway. I don't get anxious or nervous for anything. So it didn't make a difference to me to not have people out there. It could be 20,000 people or 70,000 people or 5 people holding cameras, and I'll still just be sitting in a chair in the back drinking coffee until my music hits, and I just go out and go do it.
That's awesome.
So for other guys, maybe it changed a lot. So I think maybe having the fans come back is going to be a big shot of energy for a lot of the guys. Yeah. And for a lot of them, this might be the difficult part. I think losing the fans maybe wasn't as hard as getting them back will be for a lot of guys, because a lot of people have gotten used to not having that type of pressure. So
yeah, and with no fans now, you can, as soon as fans come back, you'll see more what these characters can bring out of the people. You're going to be able to see their play up with the fans.
Yeah, exactly. So,
and how was your time in ECCW, the Canadian promotion up here? I mean, I go to them up in Vancouver all the time.
Well, let's see. I made a couple trips up there at different times. First time was back in 2004. I believe I may have even met a young Mauro Ranallo at that time. I'm not sure. I can't. I'll have to ask him again when it was we first crossed paths. But that was the first time I came up, and I was still wrestling as Puma under the mask at the time. I came up with Daniel Bryan, and we were representing New Japan at the time. And it was cool. It was a lot of fun to come up there. I met a young Davey Richards for the first time on that trip. And I guess for big fans of Davey, or if you're a big detractor of Davey, you might have me to thank for either of those things. Because I remember he was just kind of spinning his wheels up in the I guess as they call it, the PNW. And he wanted to kind of do more with his career and his talent. And I kind of helped him get down to LA, and that kind of led him to New Japan. And then he eventually got, branched out to Ring of Honor, and then into, TNA and New Japan, as a full-time performer and all that. And he may not have done that if he never crossed paths with me and Brian. So, but that was one of the fortunate things I think about my career, especially at that time, was that he was somebody that I ended up becoming good friends with, and really enjoyed being around him and getting in the ring with him. So, and speaking of, I'm actually really happy that he's going to be back. Yeah,
of course. And what I was thinking there is a lot of people, when I look back on who's come through ECCW, they've had a lot of now big name people. Even there's guys on AEW like that Janawa and the Singh brothers, of course. They're from right here in Vancouver, right across the bridge.
Yeah. So then I didn't go back to ECCW until
Janawa.
Right after I left WWE, I think. Okay. I made another trip up to Vancouver and wrestled there again, and the show had grown so much. They had different venues now and such a big feel to it. It was pretty amazing, the experience.
Yeah, that's for sure. What was your first ladder match like?
Oh, let's see when the first one was. I don't really remember when the first one was. I'm trying to think.
And that was in my notes.
Gosh, 2006, I think I had a local one. That might have been one of the better matches I've ever done. Even as a young kind of raw performer, it was a lot of fun to do. And I think later on I had one as Suicide or Manic.
That's the one TNA. I think I wrote down.
Yeah, actually, it's kind of, I guess, topical because it was at Slammiversary, I believe, 2014, maybe. And that was the first day I met Crazy Steve. And actually, I think I just reposted. Somebody had posted a clip of that match of me and Davey crashing through some ladders towards the end of it. That was a fun time in the company, or just in my career in general. I was wrestling Davey a lot, and Eddie. Both guys are I consider to be good friends. I met Crazy Steve at that time. He had just come into the company, and he's since become one of my best friends in wrestling. I was just about to form a tag team with Sonata, who now is in New Japan and is this huge star in Japan. I remember that being that time. It was a really, really cool time.
Mike, you got one?
Yep. Sorry, phone just fell over. What would you say your favorite piece of sports memorabilia is that you've got over the years?
And I know because last time I seen you had that nice backdrop last time as well. I see all your masks this time, but last time you had the suicide costume and the belt.
Is there like one thing that like means the most to you?
I still have those things. They're just in other parts. Like there's that one, and then other side of my desk there's the cruiserweight one and some more stuff. As far as sports memorabilia, let me think.
Or one of those items stick out to you as like the most, like means the most to you.
Like, which is your favorite mask too?
Oh gosh, I don't know. My favorite mask. I actually really like. So it's not really my mask. But it is the mask that I first started wrestling in. Because when I started wrestling, I was so young and I was so small that any local promoter would just give me a mask from the merchandise table just to wrestling because I had to cover up my age. So one of the first ones I did was, if you see here, there's a mask, a yellow and black one. Yeah. It's a clown looking mask. Now that's Super Muñeco. He's a Mexican wrestler. A lot of people know him. And that was the first mask I wrestled in. I always really liked that one. All the other masks on the walls, these are just masks of other people, but that particular one is one I actually wore. And that's probably maybe my favorite one just because of that. And I don't know, as far as sports memorabilia goes, I have a couple things from the Lakers that are pretty cool. I have a ball and a jersey from Kyle Kuzma and a jersey from Dwight Howard as well.
Wow.
From his first time as a Laker. Yeah. So those are, for me, those are pretty cool. And a friend of mine gave me a ticket stub from Kobe's last game. I have that around here somewhere.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And talking
to Kobe. That Kobe last before he retired.
Say again.
I said you was there whenever he.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. I wasn't. Well, so the 81 point game was a while back, but his last game, I wasn't able to go. I had to work, so I watched it from a hotel room when I was on the road, and so a friend of mine was able to get a ticket stub, and they gave me one of the ticket stubs from the game. So I have it somewhere around here. Actually, I have it right here. It's up here with some of my wrestling stuff.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, they have this.
Wow, that's sweet. That is sweet.
Yeah, me and Mike.
They made like a little coin from it. Yeah.
Me and Mike are big on the collecting sports memorabilia as well.
Right.
So talking about masks, TJP, did you ever have the chance to meet Rey Mysterio? Obviously, one of my favorites growing up.
Yeah, met him several times. I wrestled him one time. His first match outside of WWE in Mexico, I wrestled him. That was in Tijuana Auditoria.
Wow, that's sweet.
Yeah, before I left WWE, we were probably in the same. We were in the same locker room there for a year or so. He had come back, and I didn't leave the company for another year, so I'd see him every week.
Do you have a dream match or a dream venue to wrestle in one day?
The next one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't really believe in putting stuff on pedestals. So I always just figure whatever the next thing I do, I hope that that's the best thing I ever do. And whoever I'm in the ring with, I hope that's their best match too.
Do you have a favorite match of your career so far?
I don't know. I generally kind of feel like once I do it, it's none of my business anymore. So it's out there, and if everybody else enjoys the matches, maybe they have their favorites or whatever of mine. But I mean, they're all nice to me. A lot of my favorites are matches in small places and at small times that nobody would ever realize they existed, and they wouldn't even know. But they're my favorites, just for different reasons, as with friends or. Is a nice place or a nice time, stuff like that.
Yeah, you had to be there, like a house show or something.
Yeah, or even just a small like bar room event. I don't know. There's a lot of different things that I enjoy quite a bit. Obviously the stuff that people have watched me do is I like them all, but they don't particularly stand out to me just because it was for a big company or on pay-per-view or something like that. I like whatever I liked.
What's one challenge you came across in getting to where you are today?
Well, being homeless was one. That was a pretty big one. I mean, I also came into the business at a time when like it wasn't common for people to be this young or this small. So, and I'm not even really a terribly small guy, 5'10", maybe 170, 180 pounds. So, I'm
bigger than me.
Maybe a little bigger. Yeah. I mean, maybe a little bigger than average, but I'm average,
Yeah.
But in regards to what I do, I am a small guy. And in regards to what I do at the time that I started, I was a very, very small guy, and very young. So that was a pretty big thing, to break in at 13 years old, and I'm 5'3", 130 pounds, maybe. And everybody else is, 28, 30 years old, something like that. And they're 200, 250 pounds. And, they got like families at home and mortgages and a whole career to worry about. And I'm having to ride in the back of those cars and understand that and catch up with them at just 13 years old. So that was a pretty big thing to do. So in a lot of ways I grew up really fast, and in a lot of ways I didn't get a chance to grow up. So it kind of was a big challenge in that way.
Ryan's still waiting for his growth spurt.
Yeah, they told me they told me it was coming in elementary school, and I've been holding off waiting for it since. I can't wait to expand my height on my Tinder profile.
Who would you say helped train you or gave you the extra push to make it pro?
Well, I've had a lot of coaches over the years. Not a lot of mentors, and there's a difference. I've had a lot of guys that coached me, because they're in the beginning and for a long time, probably the first decade of my career, I don't know if it was a complex or what, but I didn't want to stop being a student. So I was always going to places like under the assumption I'm going to try to be a student there. And I had started doing really great things as a performer, and in some ways or a lot of ways became a star even when I was younger. But I still, to me, when I looked in the mirror, I thought, okay, when I go to this place, I'm going to try to really learn a lot. And I still kind of feel that way now in a lot of ways. But so, when I first broke in Los Angeles, I had Jesse Hernandez and Bill Anderson. They had a gym together, and then they split up and they each had their own gym. And I trained with both. And then shortly after that, probably the most important coach I've ever had in my career was Kevin Quinn. He's out of Chicago, but he had moved to Los Angeles. He was training out of a small gym in Los Angeles, and he was working with, he worked with a lot of guys. Like, so CM Punk was a Kevin Quinn guy. Samoa Joe was Kevin Quinn guy. The Havana Pitbulls, Kevin Quinn guys. John Cena was a Kevin Quinn guy. A lot of guys. Christopher Daniels was a Kevin Quinn guy, and a Kevin Quinn partner. Lita was a Kevin Quinn student. In a like a mentee, so to speak.
She's the reason I love redheads.
So there's a lot of people that were sort of influenced by him, and he was the most important coach I've ever had, because I had a lot. Like I said, I had Bill and Jesse in the beginning, and I had a lot of like different lucha libre gyms I'd go in and out of in Los Angeles. And going to New Japan, I was a young boy in the system, so I had coaches there and people that were sort of like mentors for me. Antonio Inoki was a mentor for me, and Liger and Kanemoto and all these guys. But the difference, I think, was like all these other guys, at best, they would hand me fish at different times. But Kevin was the first person to teach me how to fish. Like, he taught me how to think. So he made me sustainable and what's the right terminology? Sufficient, you know.
Okay. What would you say your favorite tattoo is, or your favorite artwork?
I don't know. I mean, they're all, you know, stuff. Probably this one on my hands is my name, and also my dad's name. I'm a junior.
Okay.
The T in TJ stands for Teddy. And so, you know, I had gotten this one as a way to, you know, for me and my dad. So probably that one, I would say.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's what I always say, Mike. You know, you get them at a certain time, and it's a part of your life from there on. Like each one of mine all has an era of my lifetime. They okay.
I was about to say,
hang on.
Go ahead, dude.
Hang on. Let me shoot the shot here. We're talking about tattoos. I heard a rumor that Vince, is that why you left WWE? Because you got a tattoo without Vince's permission?
No, that had nothing to do with it.
Oh.
So there's a lot of fill in the blanks because I'm not a terribly like public guy as far as, you know, like everybody that leaves there, they either have a million people to thank or they have a huge axe to grind. And I had neither, you know, like I didn't, and I don't feel like if I ever did, it's not something I'd ever really feel like talking about. Cause I don't really,
of course,
I don't like to whine for attention, I guess, you know, or blame others, you know. I'm not big on blaming anybody but myself for anything. But so, you know, when I left, it was just time to go. I wanted to leave. I thought I was wasting their money and I wasn't really a good investment for them. I wasn't having fun anymore. That's really the most important thing.
Yeah.
And so it's maybe about a year before I left, I had knocked on Vince's door. We were in London. I remember it very specifically. We were in London in 2018, maybe, I guess. And I knocked on his door and said, look, I feel like I'm a waste of investment for you. You know, I'm on a show that's just about wrestling and it's not particularly interesting, which is what 205 was. And I said, like, and I'm just a guy that wrestles good and I wear tights. Everybody on your roster is a good wrestler though. So that doesn't set me apart. Everybody's incredible here. So me being good at it doesn't necessarily mean anything. And I said, you know, I'm not happy here. I'm wasting your money. And so we talked a little bit and I said, well, I don't believe in quitting. And I would like to do better. And so he said, well, how can we use you better? And I said, okay, well, I'll show you. So I spent a year trying to just sort of reconnect with what I was in the CWC and having that connection with like my culture, my heritage and, you know, Asian Americans and things like that. And I really kind of learned the value in being an ambassador for that. And I wanted to be for him like what Eddie was and Ray is for like Latinos and stuff like that. I wanted to do that for like my culture and you know, Filipinos and Asian Americans and all that. And he didn't have somebody that would be like a kind of a goodwill ambassador for that or a character on the show to represent that either. So I felt like there's a lot of things both on and off camera that I would be good at. So I put all this together and found different groups that would love to work with the company and things like that. And I came back, I think around Survivor Series, and I said, you know, you asked how we could use me better. Here it is. And he said, great. Love it. In Vince's mind, creative drives the boat. So he's like, first things first, we got to figure out a way to create something. We need a story for you and you need to get off that show. I mean, he knew that I could. He's like, we can't do this with you on 205. We got to put you on like something else. So we're going to, it was no, I was already a heel, but he wanted to move me to Raw. So he was like, all right, well, we'll see if we can find you a spot for Raw and write something and we'll, you know, get with the creative team and see what comes up. So I wrote for stories for everything, you know. I wrote some big, some small, you know. Most guys, you know, in that position, they think, here's my story. I win the world title at WrestleMania. And it's like, well, yeah, 25 people just pitched that story. Yeah. So, you know, I wouldn't really write stuff like that. You know, I wrote one or two things. Like, I think I wrote something for like the Intercontinental title, and I wrote stuff for other things. But most of the stuff I just write for anything. Me and Jinder in like a David Goliath type story, and like to kind of work with the Bollywood boys and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, I wrote a similar thing with like Finn and Lashley were in a thing at the time, and I was like, well, you know, I know Finn, like as human beings, we have history from being together in different places like Japan, and Lashley has Leo, and Leo was they're wasting his talent. You know, he didn't have anybody to wrestle because he's a little bit too small for a lot of the guys. So I was like, I could have matches with him, but I could also have matches with Bobby too. And I had, you know, I wrote me and Elias, like some like funny stories and things like that. So, you know, I tried to pick, you know, guys who didn't have stuff going or stuff I could do with everybody else. And it just, nothing ever stuck, and it didn't really work out. So when he didn't have anything for me, it was like, all right, well, you know, we don't have anything for you. We don't want you to be unhappy. So we're going to let you go and go out, spread your wings. I respect what you want to do. You got a lot of balls, and you're fearless in your approach, but I don't know how to do this with you. So they let me go. And you know, I had been pretty clear, like, if we can't make this work, I want to go. So it's like, you know, I wanted to go back to Japan. I didn't really want to be in WWE in the first place. When I was in CWC, I turned down the first offer. Like, they offered me something. I said no. They offered it with more money, and I said I still got to think about it. And I didn't sign a contract until Clash of the Champions. The tournament was already over. I was going to go to Lucha Underground and go back to Japan and do some. I had been in TNA for a few years. I finally was out, and I was like, you know what? Like, I just wanted to go back to Mexico and do some of the stuff I've not done for a while. So WWE was really a detour. So when I was over it later, I was like, I was ready to go. So when they let me go, it was like, all right, well, I was ready to go. Okay. But yeah, like I think the tattoo thing came up because like there wasn't really a story. Like I didn't get fired for like destroying a hotel room or committing a crime or anything like that. I just got let go. And I think for a lot of people, I'm sorry.
I said getting all releases now because it's pretty much a lot of them is getting released.
Yeah. I just think that in my case at the time it was like, well, he's a guy that you probably would want to keep. Why would you let him go? And it wasn't that I was like openly complaining, like I quit, I hate this place, because I don't do that. And I didn't particularly do anything wrong. So it was like people were like, well, there must be something wrong. So they would invent something. And the tattoos were, I think, everybody's sort of scapegoat. Like, oh, he must have broke the rules. But it's like, I wasn't on TV every week. So most people, like if you're a fan, think about like this, like if you're a fan, you don't see me on TV for say 4 or 5 weeks. And in those 4 or 5 weeks, I get my tattoos done. So then when I come back, it's like, oh, wow, he got all these tattoos. He must have just shown up out of nowhere. But it's like, just because I wasn't on TV doesn't mean I wasn't at the arenas. I was still at work. I just wasn't wrestling. So I would see Vince every day. If he ever had a problem with the tattoos, he would have fired me after the first one, not after the 20th one, you know? Yeah. So I think that's the other thing. There's a disconnect in like fans' eyes or like, say like, wrestling writers' eyes, because they're still looking at it through the eyes of the fan. Like, oh, he must have got fired for tattoos. He just showed up out of nowhere. But I wasn't sitting at home. He would see me every week with them.
They got to come up with something, you know, the media.
Yeah. So it's like he would have fired me after the first one, not the last. You know, like, yeah, I got the approval for them and everything. I remember I would have got them probably a year sooner. It took like 6 months to get them approved. I was waiting and did everything the right way. So I waited until the office and talent relations was like, okay, you could do this.
Hey,
and I have one. Because we was talking to Eric this time, and he kind of surpassed it. Like, all these, like, brand, you know, with AEW and Impact, who's somebody in AEW that you know that you've been wanting to take on? Who's the one that's been on your mind that you been wanting to wrestle? New Japan too.
I mean, anybody, I guess. I don't really believe in making bucket lists like that. Maybe I'm on somebody else's bucket list. I don't know, but as far as I'm concerned, they're all like, everybody's the same to me. I mean, like, you could be,
who's going to pay the bills?
Yeah, I mean, you could be Kenny Omega, or you could be like Jason Crawford out of, Kentucky, and that's the same to me. I don't really, it doesn't really matter.
Okay. Hey, so I'm kind of confused about the AEW and the Impact collabo thing. And how does that really work? Like, Omega was Impact champion. Like, I'm so confused on what's going on, how two shows merged together.
I mean, I'll be honest. I don't really know. I don't watch that part of it. I don't have any interest in the crossover. Like, I don't like, there's not anybody I particularly care to wrestle, like, as far as like a bucket list thing. And it's not really what I've not been part of any of that business myself. Like, it's not something that they've asked me to do. So like, to me, it's like out of sight, out of mind. I don't really, I don't even know the matches that they've been doing, to be honest. Like, they asked me one time, like, can we get a soundbite? Like, who you think is going to win this one match? And I said, I don't know. I don't care. It's not my match. It's not my match. I don't know,
Okay, so I mean, so you will be like, man, I'll take any of them on, like, just any of them.
Yeah, sure. I mean, a lot of the guys in the company are friends of mine, so I'm sure I'd have a lot of fun wrestling a lot of them.
Right.
The Bucks are friends of mine. Yeah. Scorpio Sky is a friend of mine.
Right.
I've wrestled Darby Allin before I went to WWE, and I think very highly of him. Kenny is another guy. I've wrestled him before in Japan at the Super Juniors, and I would love, to wrestle him again. I think he's really good. There's tons of people that I think the world of. Trent, I think, is really good, and he's hilarious too. So I know I'd have a lot of fun doing it.
Right.
So it's not really a question of that per se. Like, there's nobody I don't want to wrestle. There's nobody that it's like, oh, I would love to do this because it's something I need. Like, I don't. That's whoever. If somebody's there, then I'll do it.
Man, I said that because I was just like, I've been wondering if they really just want to, see who they will have chemistry with, like who you will have chemistry with, and who you would, have a good match with.
Well, I'd have chemistry with anybody. I wouldn't be any good at this if I didn't have chemistry with everybody.
That's true. That's true.
Exactly. That is true. That's true, though.
Can you tell us a little bit about your 1 hour Ironman match with Josh Alexander?
Yeah,
that's what I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, is there a particular question or anything about it that you were wondering? Or
what's it like wrestling in an Ironman match?
Yeah.
Well,
1 hour.
It was a little bit. Trying to think of. The workload is kind of high, and I don't mean physically necessarily. Like, I mean, that's tough as it is. And Josh is at times can be a particularly tough guy to wrestle because he's an incredible athlete, and he's a very hard wrestler. Like he works really hard. So sometimes it's like you really feel like you're in a war with him. And he might be my favorite guy I've ever wrestled. And for a lot of reasons, it's because of that. So, there's a lot of things physically that are difficult about wrestling for an hour, of course. But, I think that maybe the primary obstacles are just the programming challenges, because there was, I don't know, 5-6 commercial breaks or something that I had to manage in my head. And we were, unlike all the other programming that's been taped lately, this wrestling had no breaks, so we had to perform like it was like live, like a pay-per-view or something like that. but I still had to mentally manage like these like TV timeouts and then still wrestle through them. And generally in the ring, and I don't have to do it with a guy like Josh because he's really smart and he's really good and he's got a lot of experience. But, you know, even with guys like Josh or whoever, I tend to always kind of be the quarterback in matches. I don't know if it's because of my experience or just because it's my natural disposition as a performer. Like I said, playing team sports, it's just, I was always good at facilitating, you know. Maybe I wasn't always the touchdown guy or the scorer, but I was pretty good about game management. Now, I'm that same way in wrestling. So I had to have my hands on a lot of buttons, like for an hour. And so that's a lot to like micromanage in your head as you're physically being, you know, beat to death. So that was kind of tough. And I went into it with a broken nose. I broke my nose a couple weeks prior, and I'd kept getting it maybe rebroken because it kept getting hit. I didn't take any breaks in my schedule, so I was wrestling still for New Japan and Impact. So I kept getting it like messed up. So I was wrestling this match, not really able to breathe fully in my nose and having to kind of protect it and think about it while I was doing it. So just a lot of little things like that.
My beak's been busted so many times that I have the worst breathing too. I can't breathe out of half my face. Like, mine's because I've been talking when I should have been listening. and alcohol. Do you have a favorite movie?
Back to the Future.
Okay.
Yeah. And The Prestige.
Okay. Any hidden talents other than wrestling?
Well,
wrestling's not hidden, so any talents other than wrestling?
I mean, I don't know. I think there's still some of it that's pretty hidden from people, but that'll be up to them to discover over the next till I'm dead, I guess. I don't know. I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, I think people don't realize like that I was pretty good with sports, like an all sport athlete, you know. Some people probably know, others probably don't. Like, I guess it depends on what version of me you know me as. Like, some people do think of me as this like great athlete in wrestling. So then for them, it's probably obvious. But some people just look at me like, oh, he's a smaller, nerdy guy that's good at wrestling. And so they might be surprised to know that I, you know, grew up watching SportsCenter every morning and playing football and stuff like that in my youth. So sports might be a thing. And otherwise, I mean, I don't know. I mean,
my hidden talent is I can do West Side, but I can do it with my toes and no hands.
That is freakish. I'm very glad you shared that.
Yeah.
That was pretty interesting. Okay. I know. I see you always have some. Speaking of gear, you always had the flyest gear. Till now too. Like and the fresh shoes. Which one is your favorite? Which pair of shoes did you like on your attire?
You mean as far as like in the ring?
Yeah, in the ring.
Well, so one time, couple times. And it's not necessarily my favorite shoe in the ring. Like, I didn't actually wear these shoes more than maybe once or twice, but they happen to be my favorite shoes outside of the ring. I had wore a pair of Kobe 6 Grinches, the green ones from his Christmas game. I wore them on Christmas one time on Raw, and another time I wore them under the Suicide outfit. And so that might be the easy answer as far as that goes. But I mean, as far as like right now, I don't know. Like I was a really big fan of these when I got these done recently. The Jordan 11 Concord boots.
Those are sick. Those are sick.
And I got my birth year put on the back instead of 23.
Wow.
And I got them laced up on the inside like traditional Lucha Libre lacing. And then I had a couple other pairs. Like I had these ones are like the black cement 3s with the elephant print.
Yeah.
And the gray and red tongue.
That's
and
cool.
then On that same note, I had the Fire Red 3s done just recently. This is what I wore on the Ironman. So this is like the black on black elephant print.
Yeah.
You can see the elephant print up close if I get close, but otherwise you. And then like the red eyelets and the red and white tongue.
That's cool.
So those are probably some of my favorites that I really liked.
Have you had the chance to wrestle in the Philippines yet?
Yeah, after I left WWE, I had maybe the end of that first year in 2019, it was in October. I had helped promote a one night only event where I wrestled out there for the Philippines company, the pro wrestling PWR.
Okay.
And I had like a week of media appearances. So I did like Sports Center in the Philippines. I did CNN in the Philippines and stuff like that to help promote the event. It was a really great show, and we did the event there. And then I ended up staying out and then touring New Japan right after. So I went over to Tokyo right after from that. But yeah, I got to make a couple trips to the Philippines that year and set up to help promote that show.
That's my favorite. My favorite rum is Filipino rum, Tanduay. I can, I love that stuff. Anytime I got friends going back home, I'm always like, oh, bring some back for me. I love that shit.
What do you want your legacy to be remembered as?
I don't know.
It's a ways away, but
yeah, I mean, I hope it's a ways away, but I don't really care about that sort of thing. I mean, if people forget all about me as soon as I'm done, that's fine. I don't really need that, I guess. Maybe like for my kids' sake, I have my first boy is going to be born, here in a couple months. And I hope that, I've I guess done enough for him to be proud, I hope that he grows up thinking, wow, my dad was pretty cool. Yeah. But more importantly, I hope that everything I've done will help me to be able to raise him, and he won't ever need anything, and that's more important to me. I've never been big on optics. Like, I don't really care what people think of me, and it doesn't really matter. And I know a lot of people will say that sort of thing, but when they say that, they usually just mean they don't care when people don't like them. They just want people to like them. And I don't think that that's fair. I think if you're able to tune out negativity, you also have to take positivity in stride. Like, you can't just be all about like yourself. So I've always felt like if obviously I tune out negativity and people that don't care for me or don't like me or just are hateful. But at the same time, when people really love me, I try not to let it go to my head. It does. Whatever my legacy is at the end of the day that's for other people. I mean, that's what they'll look, like Babe Ruth's legacy is for me and you and people like that. It doesn't really matter to Babe Ruth, He lived it. It doesn't matter to him.
True.
And how about when fans see you out in the streets and ask you for like an autograph?
Oh, I mean, to me, that's the important thing about that sort of thing. Because if it's something that's positive to others or inspires them or even just makes their day one time, then that's great. I love that. I love meeting people and taking a picture with them or whatever the case may be. And, I'll get it occasionally at Disneyland or at the mall or something like that. Or at airports, I'll get it a lot at airports usually is like the more common one, I guess. But yeah, I mean, of course I love that. When I was in WWE, it used to, whatever car I was riding in used to hate me because whenever I would arrive and whenever I'd leave, I'd spend as long as it took outside the arena coming and going to make sure I signed for everybody or took a picture for everybody that was asking. I never stopped at any point and said, sorry guys, I got to go now. Like, ever. So I was always late to work. Like, I was always like 30 minutes late to get into the building because I was there on time. Awesome. But then I would spend an hour outside talking to everybody. And then on the way out, when all the guys wanted to get to the next town or get to the hotel or, go get food, I was like, you guys got to wait because I'm not going to turn anybody away. I hate that. I would never do that to somebody. Same thing at like airports and things like that. 4 or 5 a.m. It doesn't matter. Like I'll sign for everybody. I'll make sure to make time for everybody. Like,
Perfect.
So,
Perfect. I'll be sending you a picture to get autographed.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate that. As you can see our walls, we definitely collect that stuff, and we appreciate when people do take their time for us.
Right.
Yeah.
Because coming for me, like, because I have had a lot of signatures, and I got pretty much the ones that I'll be like, yo, I can't believe I get them. You know what I'm saying? Because coming as a wrestling fan, that really means a lot to us. So
yeah, I mean, I always tell them, like, I still am one. Like, I tell guys all the time, I'm still on that side of the guardrail. I snuck in. That's all.
Yeah.
At some point, I snuck in. And, yeah.
I wanted to tell you too, man. I really wanted to tell you. It's one because coming as a wrestling fan, all of us is the match you wish you was there that you watched on TV. It could be any of them. What was your favorite match or live match?
My favorite Raw match was a tag team match from 1997. Shawn and Austin wrestled Davey and Owen for the tag titles, and that is my favorite Raw match ever.
Okay.
And I don't know, just not for any particular reason. I felt like all the boys were on that night, like they were all clicking and everything was working and they're rocking. But that was my favorite match, from Raw, and that would have been one that I feel like, man, that would have been great to be in the building and watch that one live.
I just saw this now that Prince threw that in. My answer to that question would have to be the 96 Bash at the Beach NWO forms, obviously, when
Turns on, turns on Macho.
Yeah, that would have been a pretty big one. Yeah.
Hey, Hey, TJP, I just want to thank you very much for taking the time for us today and coming on. Obviously, you can tell we're big fans of you, and it meant a lot to us to speak with you. We appreciate the time.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Looking for the most beers on tap, great steaks, great staff? Head over to the John B. Pub.
We got the best beers, steaks, chicken wings, nachos in town. Come see us at the John B. Pub.
The John B. Pub, the best bar in town. Come sign up for our football pool. Say Hey sent you.